And Buck, I think that's over. I think that's done. But
What do you mean?
I think his career is finished.
That line from 50 Cent hit way harder than anyone expected because not long after, L. Buck's whole world started breaking apart. Bankruptcy filings, IRS pressure, jail time over probation violations. His career didn't just fall off. It crumbled piece by piece in front of everyone, and the real reason behind it all is way darker than what the public ever imagined. From the streets to the spotlight, Buck's journey already had warning signs hidden in it. His story starts in Nashville, Tennessee, where David Brown learned quick that life wasn't set up to show him love. He bounced around the city nonstop, from Seafright in North Nashville to J.C. Napier in the South, then over to the South 7 projects. By the time he was 8, he was an some kid running around aimlessly. He already knew the city like a grown man who had survived it. The environment shaped him, hardened him, and gave him stories that would later pour out in his music with real force. To bring money home and take some stress off the crib, Buck hustled in every clean way he could.
But what did happen was Buck and Lil Jimmy and
Pumping gas for tips, mowing lawns, washing cars, anything that put cash in his hand without crossing the line. That grind built his discipline fast, but music quickly became the place where he could breathe and talk his truth. He started freestyling with his day ones, taking on anybody who thought they could out-rap him. And slowly his name started spreading around Nashville's underground like a secret everyone wanted a piece of. Then came the moment that showed just how fearless and hungry he really was. Buck and his homie found a CD from BG of Chopper City, and on the back was a phone number for Cash Money Records. Most people would have ignored it, but these two had a wild idea. They actually called the number like they were some Nashville promoters. They told Cash Money they wanted to book them for a show for around $5,000, talking bold and confident even though they barely had a plan, and somehow it worked, kind of. The show never happened, but the move shocked everyone because it opened a door no one expected.
ended up meeting everybody at Cash Money Records, and the first thing that Birdman told Buck was to spit.
Birdman was impressed by the guts, the hustle, the boldness. The energy Buck carried was so undeniable that Birdman flew him out to New Orleans right away to see whether he had what it took to officially join Cash Money. That single phone call flipped Buck's entire life and put him on the road that would eventually lead him to fame, fortune, and later. One of the darkest downfalls hip-hop had seen in years. At just 14 years old, Buck made a decision that most grown men are scared to make. He walked away from school completely and threw himself into rap full-time. No halfway effort, no second-guessing, just pure commitment to the craft. Whether it was the right move or not isn't the point. What really matters is that it shows how locked in he was. This wasn't a hobby. This wasn't something he did after class. This was his whole escape plan, his shot at freedom. Music wasn't just passion to him.
A freestyle for him, and he put him up against Lil Wayne at that time, and they went back and forth. And that ended up impressing Birdman.
It was the only door he believed could take him out of the environment he grew up in. Every freestyle, every verse, every night spent writing instead of sleeping, it was all part of the mission he saw as his way out of the hood. You could feel the hunger in every rhyme he dropped, even back then. But when it came to Cash Money, the truth is, Cold Buck barely had anything to show from that whole experience. The only real proof of that era is his cameo in Big Timer's Big Ballin' video, a tiny snapshot of a dream that never got the chance to bloom. By 1999, Buck hit his breaking point. He watched everyone else level up while he kept getting pushed to the side, and he knew he couldn't stay stuck in that background role forever. So he made the tough decision to bounce from Cash Money and return to Nashville to grind on his own terms. Even though those years didn't turn him into a star, they weren't wasted at all. He picked up priceless game about the industry, learned how the business really moves.
Buck ended up coming on with them and hopefully having his situation figured out as well. But as years went on, Buck said he spent 3 to 4 years with Cash Money and none of his music ever got released. He got essentially put on the back burner while the other artists on Cash Money like Lil Wayne, Juvenile, BG, so on and so forth ended up blowing up.
And built serious connections with people like DJ Paul from 3-6 Mafia and Juvenile relationships that would end up having a huge impact later. Back in Nashville, Buck linked up with his squad and went full independent mode. No label funding, no big team behind him, just raw work ethic and non-stop hustle. On August 22, 2000, he dropped Thug by Nature with his homie D-Tay and something crazy happened. It actually charted. This wasn't some major label rollout.
And out of my ordeal back in the streets, I ended up getting shot in a home invasion and a robbery. One in the arm and two, one in the upper thigh area. It was enough for me to wake up and really realize that, yo, if this shit keep going on like this, I'm either to get killed or I'm go to jail. And I really realized that because I was getting down for real. Really started to devote more of my time to the music then, the studio.
This was two artists moving CDs by hand, and they still hit number 34 on the US R&B chart and number 17 on the independent chart. For an unknown rapper from Nashville grinding out the trunk, that was massive. Buck sold around 10,000 units, numbers that proved people were listening and proved that this rap thing wasn't just a dream, it was real. But life doesn't hand out wins without a warning, and Buck got his wake-up call the hard way. After surviving a shooting during a home invasion, he had a moment of clarity. He had to choose between the street life and the music life. He made a promise to himself right then that he'd pour everything into the music grind and leave the street drama behind for good. And almost like fate stepped in, help came from someone who always believed in him, DJ Paul from 3-6 Mafia. He heard about the shooting and immediately tapped in, sending Project Pat to scoop Buck from Nashville and bring him to Memphis to record. Out of those sessions came Buck's first major album placement. Memphis on 3-6 Mafia's When the Smoke Clears 6,661 album. That was the spotlight Buck had been fighting for, the moment that finally gave him the exposure he needed.
Juvie happened to pull up at the office, and when he pulled up, he was kind of shocked to see me there. I'm like, I've been here for a whole week. And he was like, man, you won't get up out of here for a minute, you know what I'm saying? And I took that ride with Juvie, and that's where my career started, with Juvenile.
Even though he didn't end up signing with 3-6 Mafia, the impact was huge. He returned to Nashville, still independent, but now with way more industry respect, way more connections, and way more eyes watching his next move. Are we getting ahead of ourselves, fam? Before the G-Unit era even kicks in, we gotta break down how Buck actually ended up joining the crew, because that part of his journey is straight up wild. His whole life pivoted off one moment, and the chain reaction that followed feels like something out of a movie. When life got real, Birdman, Buck's old connection from the Cash Money days, reached out again with a brand new proposition. Cash Money wasn't the small, hungry operation Buck first met in the late 90s. This time, the label looked like a whole empire. They had bigger offices, polished marble floors, powerful cars everywhere. Everything screamed money.
A week after the deal fizzled out with UTP, 50 Cent ended up calling Young Buck and said, hey, we want that Bloodhound track. We'll pay you $20,000 for it. Let us put it on the album. And the track is getting mixed by Eminem and Dr. Dre.
Birdman wanted Buck to join a fresh group he was forming called Headbusters, and on paper, it sounded like the doors were opening again. Buck flew back to New Orleans, ready to get to work, but history had a painful way of repeating itself. He waited around for days with no real updates, no paperwork, and no sign that anything was actually moving. He wasn't a young teenager anymore. He was a grown man with responsibilities, bills, and momentum building back home, and sitting in limbo wasn't something he could afford. The frustration started creeping in fast. Then something shocking happened. Something that would end up flipping his path completely. Juvenile pulled up to the Cash Money office and was stunned to see Buck just waiting there. At that time, Juvenile was going through his own issues with the label, dealing with disagreements and instability behind the scenes. He already respected Buck's talent, so he made him a life-changing offer on the spot. Buck officially started rocking with Juvenile's UTP records. That connection cracked open the next chapter of his career. But here's where you really see Buck's awareness and street intelligence. When Juvenile handed him the contract, Buck didn't rush to sign it. He took it home, slid it under his bed, and left it untouched. That was a power move, plain and simple. He worked with UTP, but technically he never locked himself down on paper. He dropped 2 projects during this stretch, Born to Be a Thug on October 10th, 2002, and a compilation album with the UTP Playas on October 8th, 2002. But he stayed free from any binding deal. Why keep it unsigned? Because Buck was paying attention. He had seen what went down at Cash Money, and he noticed Juvenile was running into serious problems of his own. Nothing looked secure, and the last thing Buck wanted was to tie himself to a situation that might collapse. Even Juvenile told him straight up that if something better came along, he should take it. That honesty showed the bond between them, but it also planted the seed for what came next. One day on tour, everything clicked into place. Their tour bus stopped in New York in 2002, right when 50 Cent had the entire city buzzing. He wasn't just hot, he was the hottest artist in the whole region, the name everybody whispered about. The streets, the clubs, the labels, everyone knew 50 had the next wave locked. The bus driver had a connection to 50's former manager Shaw Money XL, and Buck kept pressing him non-stop, trying to get 50 on the bus to cook up something. And unbelievably, it actually worked. 50 came on board, but he wasn't there for Buck at all. Was there to record with Juvenile specifically. While 50 and Juvie headed to the back of the bus to work, Buck made a slick, calculated play. He started showcasing his own songs to Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo in the front. No bragging, no ego, just letting the music speak. One track hit the right ears instantly. Lloyd Banks heard something in it and grabbed the beat, walking it straight to the back of the bus where 50 was recording. That moment right there was the spark that lit the fuse. 50 heard that track Banks brought him and instantly jumped on it. That record later turned into Bloodhound on the legendary Get Rich or Die Trying album project that shifted the entire rap game. But here's the twist. That wasn't even the first joint to feature all four of them together. That honor goes to a little bit of everything from 50 Cent as the future. But Bloodhound was the track that truly introduced Buck to the mainstream audience and stamped his name in people's heads. Even back then, 50 genuinely liked Buck. But there was a major issue. 50 himself wasn't officially signed to a major label at the time, so he couldn't offer Buck anything official yet. Still, 50 kept Buck in mind, watching his moves from a distance. And just like Buck predicted, things with UTP eventually fell apart, opening the door for fate to line everything up again. Once 50 locked in his situation with shady aftermath, he didn't forget who impressed him. He flew Buck out to Los Angeles to meet with himself, Eminem, and Dr. Dre, basically the three-headed dragon of early 2000s hip-hop. This wasn't a small opportunity. This was every rapper's dream meeting coming to life. After years of false starts, broken deals, and disappointing situations, Buck was finally standing in front of the people who could change everything for him. Buck's first major placement on G-Unit Records was Bloodhound, but 50 had a master plan to build him up the right way. Instead of dropping Buck's solo album immediately, 50 made the strategic decision to release a group project first, Beg for Mercy. That way fans would accept Buck as family before they met him as a solo artist. Beg for Mercy dropped and went crazy. It peaked at No. 2 on the Billboard 200 and moved 377,000 copies in its first week. To this day, it has sold over 2.7 million copies in the US alone and is near diamond worldwide. Just like that, young Buck wasn't just a rapper trying to get on. He was officially part of one of the strongest movements hip-hop had ever seen. Following the G-Unit blueprint, Buck dropped his mixtape, Welcome to the Hood, on May 31st, 2004, hosted by DJ Who Kid. The streets ate it up, and the buzz around Buck's solo debut got louder every week. Then came the first single, Let Me In, featuring 50 Cent, released July 2nd, 2004. It peaked at No. 34 on the Billboard Hot 100 and made the industry pay attention fast. Then came the moment Buck had been grinding toward for years. On August 24th, 2004, he dropped his debut album Straight Outta Cashville, and the results were insane. It debuted at No. 3 on the Billboard 200, moved 361,000 copies in the first week, and later went platinum. The second single, Shorty Wanna Ride, became his highest charting solo track ever, peaking at No. 17 on the Hot 100. Buck had fully arrived and the world was watching. But the biggest accomplishment wasn't even the plaque sit, was what Buck did for his city. For decades, artists outside of country music claimed Nashville had a curse, blocking non-country acts from getting major success. Buck shattered that wall completely. He became the first non-country artist from Nashville to achieve real mainstream dominance, opening the door for the next wave of talent from his area. That win meant everything. Then came the night that changed his path in a way nobody could have seen coming. November 15th, 2004, the Vibe Awards. The room was packed with Dr. Dre, Eminem, 50 Cent, the whole G-Unit squad, and Suge Knight. In the middle of all that energy, a man named Jimmy Johnson allegedly put his hands on Dr. Dre. What happened next became hip-hop history. Young Buck allegedly stabbed Jimmy Johnson in the chaos. Buck went on the run for a moment, but eventually turned himself in a few days later. It took nearly a year and a half for the case to fully wrap up, and when it did, Buck received 3 years of probation and 80 hours of community service. That night stayed tied to his name for years, shaping how the industry looked at him moving forward. This incident might have ended with light consequences, but it became the first major warning sign, proof that Buck's street instincts and fierce loyalty, the same traits that made him a standout, could also spin everything off track if the timing was wrong. It was the first crack in the foundation, the first moment where people around him whispered, this could come back to haunt him one day. Still, Buck kept pushing forward. In 2005, he didn't slow down for a second. He jumped on 3-6 Mafia's massive hit Stay Fly, a track that exploded everywhere, peaking at number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 and going double platinum. Around the same time, he dropped an independent project to promote the upcoming G-Unit South artists. He personally had the power to shape and push because 50 had trusted him with the whole G-Unit South operation. Buck wasn't just a rapper anymore. He was becoming a real executive, building a sub-pyre inside the G-Unit empire. By 2006, Buck flooded the streets with mixtapes, setting up his next big chapter. On February 6, 2006, he dropped Case Dismissed, the introduction of G-Unit South with DJ Drama. It was both a celebration of beating the legal issues from the Vibe Awards incident and a formal announcement of the artists he was ready to bring up under his wing. Buck was moving with ambition, strategy, and vision. But behind the scenes, a storm was brewing. While Buck was working on his second album, Buck the World, serious problems started growing between 50 Cent and their shared manager, Shaw Money XL. The tension got so bad that 50 gathered the whole crew and told them they needed to find new management immediately because he was cutting ties with Shaw Money for good. And this is where Buck's biggest strength, his loyalty, turned into his biggest weakness. In 50's eyes, Buck was way too close to Shaw Money. Close enough that Buck had even been the best man at Shaw Money's wedding. Banks and Yayo did what 50 said without hesitation, but Buck refused to drop someone he saw as real family. Buck didn't have any personal issues with Shaw Money, and he truly believed they could fix whatever business disagreements were going on. From Buck's perspective, turning his back on someone who had supported him made no sense. But 50 saw that as choosing Cyand, not choosing him. The resentment kicked in fast. Almost instantly, you'd see Banks, Yayo, 50 moving as a unit at shows and appearances, while Buck and Shaw Money were left promoting Buck the World basically by themselves. Buck always believed this is one of the biggest reasons the album didn't hit the same numbers as his debut. It sold 98,000 first week and went gold, but without the full G-Unit machine behind it, the push wasn't the same. When Buck the World dropped on March 27, 2007, it debuted at number 3 with 140,000 first-week sales strong numbers, but not the takeover moment it should have been. The singles I Know You Want Me and Get Buck didn't hit the same heights as the tracks from his first album, and the internal tension kept getting louder. At the same time, 50 started accusing Buck of being too friendly with his rivals. He pointed at names like The Game, Jadakiss, Fat Joe, Jim Jones, basically every person 50 had friction with. Buck explained that he wasn't forming friendships, he was relaying information back to 50 about what was being said. But 50 didn't care about the explanation. Even talking to them felt like another breach of loyalty. Then came the financial accusations. 50 claimed Buck was blowing money irresponsibly and ignoring his taxes. According to 50, he had already covered Buck's taxes twice before refusing to do it a third time. By 2008, Buck discovered he owed around $300,000 to the IRS, a problem that started snowballing instantly. And then came the moment that set everything on fire. January 2008, Buck performed with Lil Wayne and Birdman. Both of them said publicly that Buck should leave G-Unit and join Young Money. Cash Money. Worst of all, Buck appeared to agree while on stage. When 50 saw the footage, he was furious. February 2008, AG-Unit dropped Return of the Body Snatchers Volume 1, and Buck was nowhere on it. Fans were confused because they had just dropped Feel Good Together months earlier. Then came the moment that changed everything forever. The spark that ignited Buck's fall, bankruptcy, and the long, painful road back. In March 2008, 50 Cent and Young Buck had a private phone conversation one nobody knew existed except the two men involved. Until 50 decided the world needed to hear it. 50 was secretly recording that whole conversation, catching every word without Buck having the slightest clue. After that call, things appeared to calm down for a moment. Buck even popped back up on G-Unit's mixtape Elephant in the Sand the same month. For a second, it looked like maybe the bond could be repaired, like the tension might settle down. But that peace was short-lived, and the fallout hit harder than anyone expected. On March 20th, 2008, Raps Magazine released an interview where Buck said, "I'm still waiting on a royalty check. I've never seen a royalty check since I've signed with G-Unit." So, hell yeah, that show money is that good. "I've never in my career cashed a royalty check." Those words exploded instantly. Here's the problem. The interview was old, recorded months before, but the outlet dropped it right when Buck and 50 were supposedly fixing things. The timing was brutal, like someone was trying to throw gasoline on a spark. Shaw Money XL tried to do damage control the next day, saying Buck had earned over $10 million working under 50's guidance. But the story was already out, and momentum was building. On April 7th, 2008, 50 called into Hot 97 on a Monday morning and announced that Young Buck was no longer part of G-Unit, the group all. Though he was still signed to G-Unit Records as a solo artist, it's that line right there created confusion everywhere. A week later, the whole G-Unit crew pulled up to Hot 97 again, and 50 revealed even more. He even claimed Buck had a drug problem, adding a whole new layer to the drama. Buck didn't respond right away. He stayed silent for a couple weeks, probably trying to take in the chaos, figure out what was real, and understand what was being said about him. But then came May 12th, 2008. Buck finally answered through music, dropping my interview. A track where he addressed being removed from G-Unit and denied the drug claims. It was emotional, honest, and raw. Fans could tell he was hurting, but also fighting back. Then June arrived, the month that sealed his fate. On June 15, 2008, during a live performance, Buck publicly dissed June on stage. That was the line in the sand, the moment where there was no turning back. You can't walk that back, and everybody knew it. 2 days later, on June 17, 2008, 50 dropped the entire recorded phone conversation, the same one where Buck was crying and begging for help. It hit the internet like lightning. The next day, June 18th, Buck clapped back with a diss track called The Taped Conversation, and even the Game jumped on the remix. For a moment, it looked like Buck and Game might link up fully. There was even talk about a mixtape called Worth More Than 50 Cent. But it never happened. When Unit released their second album, Terminate on Sight, on July 1st, 2008, Buck was only featured on 4 tracks, basically treated like a guest on what should have been his squad's project. The message was clear. He was out. For the rest of 2008, Buck barely released any new official music because, according to him, 50 was blocking him. Since Buck was still signed to Junet Records, 50 had the power to approve or deny releases. And Buck said every attempt to drop new material was being shut down. That pressure left him with only one option. Starting in 2009, Buck flooded the streets with Mixtape's non-stop heat. And here's something real fans noticed. For many people who studied his career closely, 2009 was when Buck's music hit its hungriest, rawest, most emotional peak. You could hear the weight on his shoulders, the survival mode kicking in, the desperation mixed with determination. He wasn't just rapping, he was fighting for air, fighting for identity, fighting for everything he built. Buck was in a bad situation, and every emotion he carried started pouring straight into the music. In 2009, he dropped a heavy run of mixtapes, including Back for the Streets on April 11th, and the highly respected Back on My Buck on May 26th. Songs like I Want It All and I Got It, featuring Young Jeezy, showed Buck at his sharpest focused, hungry and swinging at every obstacle like he had nothing left to lose. But while Buck tried to keep the streets fed and hold on to momentum, the problems behind the scenes were stacking up faster than he could handle. On August 3, 2010, the IRS raided his home over more than $300,000 in unpaid taxes. During the raid, they found a hammer, and because Buck was a convicted felon from the 2004 Vibe Awards case, the charge fell directly on him even, though he told the agents the firearm belonged to his licensed tour manager. That raid hit him physically, mentally, and financially all at once. 3 days later, in true Buck fashion, he turned the chaos into music and dropped My Campaign, addressing the IRS raid head-on, showed how fast he could flip trauma into art, transforming stress into verses with raw power and honesty. Then on August 19, 2010, Buck filed Chapter 13 bankruptcy. But beneath the desperation was a smart strategic move. This filing allowed him to finally break away from his contract with G-Unit Records. It was a painful reset, but it gave him the freedom he needed. A few weeks later, he dropped his independent album The Rehab on September 7, 2010, debuting at No. 55 on the Billboard 200 and moving 6,400 first-week units. Solid numbers for an indie project, but nowhere near what the old Buck used to do. The legal mess didn't stop. In March 2011, G-Unit Records hit Buck with a $10 million lawsuit, adding even more weight to everything he was already fighting. But there was a small spark of hope when 50 tweeted later that year, "For some reason, I think young Buck is mad at me. Who cares? I'm giving my $250,000 back, sucker." Nobody knew what that meant, but it stirred the pot everywhere. Then on March 4th, 2012, Buck survived a drive-by shooting outside a South Nashville club. His girl was struck once in the shoulder, and it became another traumatizing chapter in a life already stacked with battles. A few months later, on July 13th, 2012, Buck was officially sentenced to 18 months in prison on the weapons charge. 1 month after he got hit with the sentence, the IRS auctioned off his possessions, jewelry, studio gear, everything. They collected $53,000, but it was a public, humiliating moment that showed just how far Buck had fallen from the top. Buck reported to prison in August 2012 and began serving his 18-month bid. On October 2nd, 2013, Buck walked out of prison, and what happened next shocked the entire hip-hop world. Behind the scenes, 50 had already patched things up with Banks and Yayo, and it turned out he had been thinking about Buck too. Then, on June 1st, 2014, at Hot 97 Summer Jam, 50 brought out all 3 original G-Unit members, and the crowd went insane. It was an official G-Unit reunion, something fans didn't think they'd ever see again. The group dropped The Beauty of Independence on August 25th, 2014, and The Beast is G-Unit on March 3rd, 2015. Both EPs had serious heat, giving fans hope that the old chemistry was back for good. Buck then launched his ambitious 10 mixtape series, 10 Bullets, 10 Bricks, 10 Pints, 10 Bodies, and more, dropping tape after tape between 2015 and 2018, and proving his work ethic was still unmatched. But trouble came back around once again. On July 15, 2016, Buck was arrested for threatening to burn down his ex-girlfriend's apartment and sentenced to 7 months in county jail. Still, in 2018, his music had a spark again. He dropped Can't Lose on March 30th, 2018. A fire record that deserved far more attention. Buck even announced that his next studio album would be executive produced by both 50 Cent and Dr. Dre, which had fans going crazy with excitement. But the peace didn't last. The relationship between Buck and 50 fell apart once more. 50 claimed Buck owed him more than $300,000 and issued cease and desist notices for anything Buck tried to release. In 2019, leaked audio of Buck talking to a trans person hit the internet, and 50 mocked him publicly online, posting homophobic content and making it clear there would be no G-Unit reunion ever again. In 2020, Buck filed bankruptcy once again, this time to escape 50's lawsuit and break free from the contract for good. After a long legal battle, he lost the case in 2023 and agreed to pay $200,690 out of the alleged $250,000 debt. To cover this and other bills, Buck liquidated assets worth around $1.05 million, spending $445,000 on legal fees and using the remaining $600,000 to pay creditors. Then in April 2025, Buck was arrested again and sentenced to 30 days in jail for repeated violations of his bond supervision linked to his pending 2020 domestic assault case. He was released around May 12, 2025, and his trial was rescheduled for January 12, 2026. But despite everything, Buck looks mentally stronger than he has in years. He's active online, celebrating milestones like the 18th anniversary of Straight Outta Cashville, and focusing on rebuilding his legacy instead of drowning in old drama.